Do you ever feel trapped inside your own mind, thinking too much about what might happen, worrying about every choice, and running through scenarios that never even occur? Overthinking doesn't make you smarter or safer. It steals your energy, clouds your judgment, and keeps you from moving forward in life. The truth is, your mind can be your biggest obstacle if you don't learn to manage it. What you need is control, focus, and clarity. In this video, you will discover how to notice when your thoughts are looping endlessly, understand why some worries keep coming back, and decide which ones actually matter. You will learn practical ways to direct your attention toward real solutions, protect your focus from stress, and train your mind daily to stay calm and decisive. These are simple steps, yet they completely change the way your brain works, the way you make choices, and the way you live every single day. If you are ready to stop overthinking everything and start taking action with confidence, this is the guide you need to follow right now. Chapter 1. Recognize when your mind traps you in endless questioning. Most people don't realize how much time their mind spends running in circles. Thoughts keep bouncing from one worry to the next. You find yourself asking the same questions over and over again, trying to figure out what could happen, what you should do, or what went wrong. It can feel exhausting and invisible at the same time. You might sit there going through every possible scenario in your head and notice that nothing ever really changes. That's what it means to be trapped in endless questioning. Recognizing that pattern is the first step toward taking control. It's not about stopping all thoughts or pretending your mind will be quiet. It's about seeing clearly when you're stuck and understanding that these loops aren't helping you make better decisions. They're just draining your energy. The moment you notice that your mind has taken over and is replaying the same questions, pause. Pay attention to how it feels physically. Do your shoulders tighten? Is your chest heavy? Is your stomach knotted? Overthinking is not just a mental habit, it creates real tension in your body. By observing both your thoughts and physical sensations, you build awareness. This awareness is not judgment, it's a tool. You are learning to identify the signal that your mind is in overdrive. Once you can recognize the pattern, you can start making deliberate choices instead of letting your thoughts control your actions. It's important to realize that endless questioning often feels like problem solving. The mind tricks you into believing that if you think enough, if you examine every angle, you will find the perfect answer. But that's rarely the case. Most of the time, overthinking keeps you frozen. It makes simple decisions feel monumental. It turns small problems into mountains. Recognizing that what you're doing is overthinking is powerful because it stops the illusion that your mind is solving the problem. You start to see that thinking endlessly is not the same as acting effectively. Begin by observing how often you ask questions that have no immediate answer. You may notice yourself asking, "What if I fail? What if I choose wrong? Did I make a mistake?" These are natural thoughts, but when you repeat them without taking action, they become a trap. Awareness of this habit gives you control. You begin to see the difference between productive thinking, which leads to action, and unproductive thinking, which leads to worry and hesitation. Recognizing this distinction is a turning point. It shifts the focus from trying to figure out everything in advance to taking steps that move you forward despite uncertainty. Another aspect of recognizing your overthinking is noticing the triggers. Certain situations, people, or decisions may repeatedly send your mind into overdrive. Maybe it's a big work decision, a relationship issue, or even everyday choices like planning your day. Observe which circumstances make your questions endless. Writing them down helps. You may be surprised how often the same triggers appear in different areas of life. Recognizing these patterns allows you to anticipate the start of overthinking and prepare strategies to respond differently. Awareness also requires noticing the consequences of overthinking. It can keep you awake at night, make simple decisions stressful, or create tension with people around you. Maybe you procrastinate because you are caught in a loop of what-ifs. Maybe your energy drains because you are thinking about the same problem for hours without resolution. Seeing the effect of this habit is essential. It motivates you to change because you understand the cost of staying stuck. Recognizing that endless questioning does not produce clarity is the first real step toward freedom. Once you can identify when your mind is trapped, start observing without judgment. Overthinking often comes with self-criticism. You tell yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way, why can't I decide?" But self-criticism fuels the cycle. Instead, notice the thoughts like a neutral observer. You might say silently, "I am questioning again," and recognize it without beating yourself up. This simple acknowledgement interrupts the automatic loop. It reminds your brain that thinking does not need to dominate your day. Recognizing overthinking also involves understanding its emotional tone. Notice if anxiety, fear, or frustration rises when your mind starts spinning. These emotions are signals. They tell you that your mental energy is being used unproductively. Awareness of these feelings allows you to pause before they escalate. You start to see that emotions and thoughts are connected, but not inseparable. You can feel the tension without letting it dictate your next move. This is a key principle of self-mastery. Noticing without reacting impulsively. You will also notice that endless questioning often comes with the illusion of control. Your mind believes that by analyzing every possible outcome, you can prevent mistakes or failure. But the reality is that most outcomes are unpredictable. Recognizing that your thoughts are trying to create certainty where none exists is liberating. It gives you permission to act despite uncertainty. You can start focusing on what you can control: your actions, your preparation, your response, rather than trying to control every eventuality through endless mental loops. The practice of recognizing overthinking is simple but requires consistency. Each day, observe your mental pattern. Identify moments when you are replaying questions, imagining consequences, or doubting yourself repeatedly. Make note of how it feels in your body and mind. This awareness is the foundation for all other steps to stop overthinking. Without it, any attempt to act or change habits will be undermined by unconscious mental loops. Awareness is the tool that allows deliberate action to take place. You will notice that recognition alone begins to reduce the power of overthinking. As soon as you label a thought loop, it loses some of its control. The mind starts to see it as a pattern rather than an unavoidable reality. You gain perspective. Perspective creates space, and space allows choices. With repeated practice, this recognition becomes automatic. Your brain learns to signal early when you are slipping into endless questioning. This early signal allows you to intervene before hours of energy are wasted. Finally, recognizing overthinking is an act of self-respect. It shows that you value your mental energy and understand its limit. By noticing these patterns, you are choosing to stop letting your mind run you into stress, anxiety, and indecision. You are taking the first step toward clarity, calm, and actionable thinking. Every time you observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, you strengthen your ability to respond intentionally, reduce mental noise, and make confident choices. This process does not require perfection. You will not eliminate overthinking overnight. You will not suddenly stop questioning yourself entirely. The goal is to recognize it as it happens, to see it for what it is, and to start acting from a place of awareness instead of reaction. Recognition is the foundation of change. Once this skill is developed, you can build further habits, deciding quickly, acting decisively, and trusting your judgment. Recognition gives you freedom, and that freedom is the first step toward stopping overthinking everything. When you can consistently notice the patterns, understand the triggers, Observe the physical and emotional signs, and separate productive thinking from endless questioning. You are no longer at the mercy of your mind. You begin to reclaim energy, clarity, and confidence. You are no longer a passenger in your own life. Recognition is the skill that allows you to step back, observe, and take control. It is the single most important step toward reducing mental chaos and creating a life where your thoughts serve you instead of draining you. Chapter 2. Examine why certain thoughts keep pulling you back repeatedly. It's easy to notice that some thoughts never seem to leave your mind. You finish one task, put one problem aside, and almost immediately those same thoughts return. They come back in the middle of conversations, at work, or late at night when everything else is quiet. These repeated thoughts create a constant background noise that can be exhausting and distracting. Most people treat these returning thoughts as unavoidable or something they just have to endure. That's where awareness changes everything. Examining why certain thoughts keep pulling you back repeatedly is about more than noticing them. It's about understanding the reasons your mind keeps clinging to them and the emotional energy they carry. When you dig deeper, you begin to see patterns and uncover what your brain is actually trying to communicate. The first step is to observe your thoughts without judgment. Stop labeling them as good or bad, right or wrong. Simply notice when they appear, how often they appear, and the situations that trigger them. Pay attention to the content of the thoughts. Are they focused on mistakes from the past, worries about the future, or doubts about your current decision? Often, these thoughts return because they are tied to unresolved emotions or unmet needs. Recognizing that they are messages rather than annoyances allows you to approach them with curiosity rather than frustration. Next, consider the emotional charge behind the recurring thoughts. Most thoughts that pull us back carry strong feelings, such as fear, guilt, regret, or insecurity. These emotions keep the mind circling because the brain wants resolution or closure. By identifying the specific emotions tied to a thought, you gain insight into why it continues to surface. Are you afraid of making the wrong decision? Do you feel shame about past actions, or do you feel uncertain about what comes next? Naming the emotion connected to the thought is an essential step because emotions are the engine driving repetitive mental loops. Once the emotion is recognized, you can choose how to respond rather than letting it control your day. It's also important to examine the underlying beliefs that support these recurring thoughts. Our minds often repeat thoughts that align with deeply held assumptions, whether accurate or not. For example, if you believe that one mistake defines your worth, you may repeatedly think about that mistake even when logically you know it doesn't. If you assume that worrying prevents problems, your mind will keep generating scenarios that reinforce that idea. Exploring the beliefs behind your thoughts exposes why they feel persistent and urgent. This is where you start shifting from passive observation to active understanding. You realize that the thoughts are not random, they are connected to what you value, fear, and assume about yourself and the world. Consider how habits of attention feed these returning thoughts. When a thought appears, do you immediately engage with it? Do you analyze it repeatedly, or imagine all possible outcomes? Each time you give attention to the thought, you reinforce its presence. The mind interprets repeated focus as importance, which strengthens the loop. Understanding this helps you see that part of why thoughts return is because of how you respond to them. By changing your response, you can reduce the energy that keeps these thoughts alive. Choosing not to engage immediately, observing the thought, and then redirecting your attention can weaken the cycle over time. Another reason certain thoughts persist is because of unresolved issues. If a situation is incomplete or a decision feels unfinished, your brain keeps revisiting it, searching for clarity. This often shows up in personal relationships, work responsibilities, or long-term goal. The repeated thought is your mind's way of signaling that something requires attention or action. Examining the thought in this context is different from reacting automatically. It requires honest assessment. Is there a practical step you can take to resolve this issue? Is there a conversation, a decision, or a clarification needed? If so, taking action stops the mental loop. If not, acknowledging that no immediate action is necessary reduces its pull. It is also critical to notice patterns of comparison. Many recurring thoughts revolve around what others are doing or how your life measures up. These thoughts often return because the mind is searching for validation, reassurance, or a sense of security. Asking why these comparisons feel important uncovers insecurities or unmet needs. Recognizing this allows you to shift focus from external validation to internal clarity. The more you understand the personal significance behind the thought, the less power it has to trap you. Pay attention to timing and environment as well. Recurring thoughts often appear during quiet moments, when you're alone, or when you are tired. The mind fills empty spaces with familiar loops because it seeks stimulation or processing. By understanding the conditions under which these thoughts appear, you can create strategies to interrupt them. Engaging in focused activity, mindfulness, or intentional tasks during high-risk periods reduces their recurrence. Recognizing the environmental triggers gives you more control over your mental patterns. Another critical factor is the connection between thoughts and identity. Often repeated thoughts relate to how you see yourself. They may question your ability, your worth, or your choices. These thoughts return because the mind is trying to protect a sense of self or correct perceived flaws. Examining why the thought is connected to identity reveals underlying fears and self-concepts. By questioning these connections and testing their accuracy, you can reduce the intensity of the loops. Over time, this strengthens self-confidence and decreases mental repetition. Notice the difference between helpful reflection and unhelpful rumination. Reflection serves a purpose. It leads to learning, decision-making, or insight. Rumination, however, keeps you circling without producing action or clarity. Recognizing the difference requires honest self-observation. Ask yourself, am I examining this thought to solve something? Or am I endlessly replaying it? This awareness guides you to shift from unproductive loops to intentional thinking that supports growth and action. Understanding the physiological impact of recurring thoughts is essential. Persistent mental loops increase stress hormones, disrupt sleep, and create tension in the body. When you examine why certain thoughts keep returning, you also notice how they affect your physical state. Recognizing this connection encourages you to act because you can feel the direct consequences. Awareness of both mind and body signals creates a full picture that motivates change. Start documenting the thoughts that pull you back. Writing them down allows you to see patterns that are invisible in the constant flow of your mind. Record the triggers, emotional tone, and beliefs associated with each thought. This process transforms abstract repetition into something tangible and manageable. By examining your thoughts in writing, you gain perspective and reduce their intensity. You also begin to notice connections between seemingly unrelated worries and understand the real issues your mind is trying to process. Finally, recognize that examining recurring thoughts is an act of self-respect and self-mastery. It is not about eliminating thoughts entirely. It is about understanding why they exist, how they affect you, and what steps you can take to reduce their control. This process strengthens mental resilience, improves decision-making, and gives you clarity. By examining these thoughts consistently, you take the first real steps toward freeing your mind from repetitive loops. You create a life where thoughts serve action, not distraction. When you practice this, over time you start responding different. You no longer feel pulled by the same questions and worries. You recognize patterns before they dominate your day.
You choose your focus deliberately. Each thought becomes an opportunity to learn about yourself instead of a trap that drains energy. The act of examining your thoughts builds confidence, clarity, and a strong foundation for taking meaningful action. Understanding why certain thoughts keep returning changes your relationship with your mind. You move from being a passive participant in your mental loops to an active observer and director. You begin to see that thoughts are not commands. They are signals to be examined, understood, and either acted upon or released. Over time, this reduces mental exhaustion, increases focus, and allows you to act with clarity and calm. Recognizing triggers, emotions, beliefs, and patterns gives you the tools to reclaim your mental energy and live intentionally. Examining your thoughts in this way is not a one-time task. It's a practice, a skill to be developed daily. Each time a thought returns, you have the opportunity to study it, understand its origin, and choose how to respond. With consistent effort, recurring thoughts lose their control. Your mind becomes a resource instead of a distraction. The repetition that once drained you now teaches you about priorities, values, and emotional responses. You transform overthinking into actionable insight and deliberate thought.
Chapter 3. Decide which worries deserve your attention today or not. Worries can feel like constant companions. They arrive early in the morning, linger at your desk, or wake you in the middle of the night. They demand energy, pull focus, and create tension in your body before you even face the day. The challenge is not eliminating worries entirely. That is impossible. Every person will experience uncertainty, fear, or concern. The challenge is learning how to decide which worries deserve your attention today and which ones do not. Understanding this distinction is essential for peace of mind, productivity, and emotional stability. Worry becomes a tool instead of a trap when you make conscious choices about which concerns are actionable and which are distractions. The first step is to pause and observe. When a worry arises, notice it without judgment. Instead of immediately reacting, give yourself a moment to consider, is this something I can influence or control? Many worries pull attention to things that are entirely outside your sphere of influence. When you acknowledge that reality, you prevent unnecessary energy expenditures. Observing a worry with clarity is a critical step because it separates reflexive anxiety from rational assessment. Next, ask yourself if the worry requires immediate action or delayed action. Some concerns are urgent and demand attention today. Others are important but not immediate. Many worries fall into neither category. They are hypothetical, imagined, or unlikely scenarios. By categorizing worries based on urgency and relevance, you stop treating every thought as a crisis. Deciding the timeline of attention allows your mind to focus where it matters and reduces the constant mental noise that feeds overthinking. It is essential to examine the cost of giving attention to each worry. Each minute spent ruminating drains mental and emotional energy. Some worries might seem important, but produce no solution when revisited repeatedly. Ask, what will happen if I think about this today? Will it help me solve a problem, prepare for a challenge, or make a better decision? If the answer is no, the worry does not deserve your immediate attention. Choosing where to invest mental energy is an act of self-discipline that strengthens focus, reduces stress, and protects emotional well-being. Consider also the nature of the worry itself. Is it based on fact, assumption, or fear? Worries rooted in facts are actionable. Worries rooted in assumptions or imagined outcomes often create unnecessary loops. By distinguishing between these types, you can respond to reality rather than to projections. This clarity prevents the mind from spinning in circles and enables deliberate action. Understanding the source of a worry provides the foundation for making rational choices about attention and energy. Reflect on past experiences as a guide. Look at worries that previously consumed your attention. which ones were valid, and which ones never led to meaningful outcome. Learning from past patterns builds insight. It helps you recognize which thoughts merit focus and which only waste your mental resources. Over time, this reflection trains your mind to identify the real problems versus imagined ones automatically. Experience becomes a teacher, and discernment becomes a skill that protects both productivity and emotional balance. Evaluate the consequences of ignoring a worry. Some worries deserve attention because neglecting them creates tangible problems. Others are minor or hypothetical and will resolve naturally without intervention. By assessing potential consequences, you create a filter for deciding attention. This is not about dismissing problems carelessly. It's about applying logic and prioritization to your mental energy. Discernment allows your mind to operate efficiently instead of reacting to every imagined scenario. It is also important to consider emotional triggers. Certain worries pull attention repeatedly because they connect to underlying fear, insecurity, or unmet needs. Recognize when a worry is less about reality and more about emotion. This awareness allows you to separate practical action from emotional reaction. You may feel compelled to obsess over a situation, but understanding the emotional attachment provides perspective. The worry loses power when you see that it is fueled by old fears or assumptions rather than by present necessity. Create a system for prioritizing worries. Write them down and categorize them based on urgency, relevance, and influence. Visualizing concerns externalizes them from the mind, making them easier to evaluate. Once written, decide which ones to tackle today, which to schedule for later, and which to let go. This tangible process transforms mental chaos into an organized approach. Prioritization turns passive anxiety into structured thinking that fosters calm and intentional action. Develop criteria for deciding attention. Questions such as, can I solve this today? Will thinking about this improve my decision? Is this worry within my control? Can I let this wait without consequence? These questions provide a consistent framework for evaluating each concern. The criteria create a standard for action, rather than allowing every thought to dictate focus. Your mind becomes a tool for problem solving, not a stage for endless anxiety. Notice the patterns in repeated worries. Some concerns return not because they are urgent, but because they tap into habitual mental loops. Your brain is wired to focus on threats, risks, or what could go wrong. Recognizing habitual worry patterns helps you identify when thoughts are unproductive. Awareness of patterns prevents the mind from automatically granting attention to every returning fear. You learn to pause, assess, and decide deliberately before investing emotional energy. Consider the impact of worry on the present moment. Many concerns pull attention away from tasks, relationships, or opportunities available right now. When you allow unimportant worries to dominate, life happens around you while your mind is preoccupied. Asking, is this worry improving my current reality, helps you decide whether to engage or release. This question redirects energy from imagined futures to tangible actions in the present. Mindful attention prevents the mind from being hijacked by irrelevant concerns. Practice setting boundaries for mental energy. Decide consciously the limits of time, intensity, and focus you will allow for each worry. Allocate attention purposefully, such as 10 minutes for problem solving and then moving on. This creates a habit of disciplined focus and prevents worry from consuming the entire day. Boundaries teach the mind that not every thought deserves unlimited energy. By enforcing limits, you build resilience and clarity. Recognize the role of self-talk in magnifying worries. Repeating phrases like, what if this happens, or I should have done better, intensifies mental loops. By noticing your language and replacing it with constructive, solution-focused statements, you reduce the power of worry. Self-talk shapes perception. When you consciously guide it toward action and clarity,
your mind learns to invest attention in productive concerns rather than spinning in fear. Understand that some worries can be solved through preparation rather than obsession. Planning, organizing, or gathering information often neutralizes anxiety. The mind is satisfied when practical steps are taken. Decide which worries benefit from preparation and execute focused action. Others cannot be solved by thinking alone, and investing time in them is unproductive. This distinction allows your attention to serve problem solving instead of reinforcing stress. Remember that deciding where to focus attention is a skill, not an innate talent. It requires daily practice, self-reflection, and consistent application. Each choice strengthens the mind's ability to filter irrelevant concerns from meaningful ones. Over time, discernment becomes automatic, creating a habit of clarity and intentionality. The mind becomes an ally in decision-making rather than an obstacle. Finally, embrace the principle that you control your focus. Worries are not commands, they are information. You have the power to decide which concerns receive energy today, and which ones wait, or never require attention at all. This empowerment changes the relationship with your thoughts. Life becomes less reactive and more deliberate. Emotional fatigue diminishes, mental clarity improves, and energy can be directed toward real problems and meaningful action. Deciding which worries deserve attention is not a one-time act, it is a continuous process. Every day presents new challenges, new uncertainties, and new choices. By consistently evaluating the relevance, urgency, and influence of each worry, you train your mind to focus on what matters. This practice transforms overthinking into thoughtful action, anxiety into deliberate focus, and distraction into meaningful productivity. Your mental energy becomes a tool to solve problems and create progress, instead of being scattered by imagined threats. When applied consistently, this approach reduces mental noise, increases confidence in decisions, and strengthens resilience. You develop clarity about what truly requires your attention and what can safely be released. Life becomes calmer, more productive, and less dominated by unnecessary worry. The mind shifts from automatic loops to intentional thinking. The power of decision over attention is transformative. It gives freedom, focus, and the ability to engage fully in the life you want to build.
Chapter 4. Direct your focus toward actions that actually change outcomes. Overthinking often comes from focusing on thoughts that do not produce results. When your mind spins endlessly, it is usually centered on possibilities, fears, or hypotheticals rather than on practical action. The key to reducing overthinking is not attempting to stop thoughts entirely, but redirecting your attention toward actions that actually change outcomes. Every worry, concern, or hesitation becomes meaningful only when paired with deliberate behavior. Thoughts without action are just noise. The challenge is learning to separate reflection from distraction and to recognize when energy is being invested in ideas that do not create change. The first step is to identify areas where you have influence. Many people waste hours thinking about circumstances they cannot control. Focusing on things outside of your control produces stress without results. Begin by listing the aspects of your life that you can directly influence: your choices, habits, communication, and effort. When you understand where your power lies, attention becomes productive. You stop being a passenger in life and start steering toward meaningful outcomes. Next, evaluate the potential impact of actions. Not every action produces the same result. Some steps significantly shift your situation, while others are minor or irrelevant. Ask yourself, which actions today will move me closer to my goals? Which behaviors create tangible improvement? This evaluation prevents wasted effort on tasks that feel busy but do not affect outcomes. Productivity comes from acting on high-impact opportunities rather than reacting to every thought or fear. Prioritize clarity over quantity, Overthinking often happens when multiple options are considered without deciding on a single course. Instead of exploring every possibility endlessly, choose a clear, specific action and commit to it. This is not about perfection, it is about progress. Even small steps that are aligned with your goals produce momentum. When you act deliberately, your mind begins to trust itself, reducing the need for constant second-guessing. Create a structured approach for decision-making. When a problem arises, break it into actionable components. Identify what can be done today, what requires preparation, and what must wait. By separating concerns into concrete steps, your mind shifts from abstract worry to practical solutions. Structured focus turns indecision into confidence. Action becomes measurable, tangible, and empowering. Recognize the difference between thought and action. Thinking prepares, analyzing informs, but change only occurs through doing. It is common to mistake mental processing for productivity, yet hours spent contemplating without implementation rarely improve outcome. The mind thrives on problem solving, but results require engagement with the real world. By making a habit of pairing reflection with decisive action, you develop competence, confidence, and a sense of control. It is essential to assess the effectiveness of each action. Some behaviors yield results quickly, others take time. Monitor outcomes and adjust your approach accordingly. Overthinking often comes from repeating actions that produce no change, while questioning every decision. Evaluation prevents wasted effort, reinforces learning, and increases the likelihood of success. Action without assessment is inefficient, but deliberate action with feedback builds mastery. Embrace imperfection in action. Waiting for the perfect plan or ideal timing fuels overthinking. No situation will ever align flawlessly, and perfectionism can paralyze decision-making. Instead, act with the information available and adjust along the way. Even imperfect actions generate results, reveal obstacles, and provide data for refinement. Momentum comes from doing rather than from endless mental rehearsal. Consider the emotional aspect of overthinking. Fear often disguises itself as planning or analysis. People spend energy imagining mistakes or failures, creating tension without producing outcome. Recognize when worry is masquerading as strategy. Redirect that energy toward tangible steps that directly influence your situation. Action transforms fear into productivity. Each step taken reduces anxiety and reinforces a sense of capability. Focus on the present moment when acting. Overthinking frequently draws attention to hypothetical futures or regrets from the past. Concentrating on what can be done right now allows your efforts to be effective. The present is where influence exists. The future cannot be controlled and the past cannot be changed. Actions rooted in present reality are far more powerful than endless speculation. Concentrating on the immediate next step builds momentum and confidence. Build consistency in small actions. Overthinking often exaggerates the importance of single events, making tasks seem monumental. By taking consistent, incremental steps, you create progress without overwhelming the mind. Daily effort compounds over time. Even modest actions aligned with goals create change and provide feedback that reduces uncertainty. Focused, repeated behavior teaches the mind that effort produces results, minimizing the need for constant mental debate. Distinguish between productive reflection and rumination. Reflection examines causes, consequences, and opportunities for improvement. Rumination endlessly reviews problems without resolution. Productive reflection guides action. Rumination wastes energy. Make reflection intentional by asking, what is actionable here? What step can I take immediately? This approach shifts mental energy from worry to solution-oriented behavior. Recognize triggers that lead to ineffective thinking. Certain situations, people, or internal states provoke over-analysis. Identify these triggers and plan how to respond with action rather than thought loop. If a particular scenario consistently leads to excessive mental repetition,
Prepare a concrete response or limit time spent considering it. Awareness of triggers prevents unproductive cycles and strengthens focus on outcomes. Leverage the power of accountability. Sharing intentions or goals with a trusted friend or mentor increases commitment to action. Overthinking diminishes when thoughts are externalized and evaluated in the context of real-world execution. Accountability provides clarity, feedback, and motivation to act. When someone else is aware of your plan, hesitation decreases, and the mind learns to prioritize execution over speculation. Separate what is urgent from what is important. Overthinking often treats every concern as critical. By distinguishing urgency from importance, you ensure that attention is applied where it creates the most meaningful results. Immediate pressures should be addressed without neglecting long-term objectives. This balance reduces mental clutter and channels focus toward actions that genuinely improve outcomes. Adopt a proactive mindset. Waiting for perfect solutions or external approval fuels overthinking. Instead, anticipate challenges and decide actions in advance. Preparation reduces uncertainty and prevents reactive mental spirals. Proactivity empowers decision-making and converts anxiety into structured steps that influence results. The mind gains confidence through repeated experiences of foresight and execution. Monitor the feedback loop of action and result. Every action produces observable consequences, whether small or significant. Assessing results informs the next step. Overthinking often arises from ignoring feedback or obsessing over unmeasured outcomes. By observing how actions change reality, you reinforce the connection between effort and outcome, building trust in your decisions and reducing mental looping. Train the mind to focus on influence. Thoughts about events beyond your control are wasted energy. Direct attention toward actions within your capacity to change. This focus reinforces a sense of agency and diminishes feelings of helplessness. Over time, the mind learns that effort produces results, minimizing the appeal of unproductive worry or endless questioning. Incorporate structured problem-solving techniques. Write down the issue, outline potential actions, evaluate outcomes, and execute. Documenting decisions externalizes the mind's process, reduces mental clutter, and transforms abstract anxiety into practical steps. Structured planning provides clarity, supports discipline, and ensures attention is directed toward actionable behavior rather than idle speculation. Finally, cultivate self-trust through repeated action. Each step taken, no matter how small, strengthens confidence in your decision-making. Overthinking thrives on doubt. Action diminishes it. The mind becomes conditioned to prioritize doing over endless thinking. As experience accumulates, clarity replaces hesitation, decisiveness replaces indecision, and results replace uncertainty. Directing focus toward actions that actually change outcomes is a continuous practice, but it is the most effective path to control, confidence, and meaningful progress. By consistently choosing to act on what matters, you transform overthinking from a mental trap into a tool for deliberate change. Every moment spent focused on effective action reinforces the mind's ability to prioritize, reduces wasted energy, and produces measurable improvement. Life becomes less about imagined scenarios and more about actual impact. Momentum grows, stress diminishes, and the ability to handle challenges strengthens. Focusing on action creates a sense of accomplishment that thinking alone cannot provide. When applied consistently, this principle reshapes your relationship with thoughts, worry, and decision-making. The mind learns that not every thought requires energy and not every fear requires attention. Energy is invested only in steps that produce results. Clarity becomes habitual, confidence strengthens, and progress becomes inevitable. Action, not endless contemplation, produces change, and this is the key to stopping overthinking everything.
Chapter 5. Break problems into small steps instead of imagining every scenario. Overthinking escalates when the mind attempts to control every possible outcome of a problem before any action is taken. The natural tendency is to imagine every scenario, from minor setbacks to catastrophic failures, and try to anticipate how to respond to each one. This habit creates tension, drains energy, and prevents meaningful progress. The key to managing complex challenges is breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps that can be addressed one at a time. Small steps convert overwhelming problems into clear, actionable tasks. This approach reduces mental clutter, reinforces control, and allows for measurable progress. Begin by defining the problem in specific terms. Vague or generalized concerns trigger endless mental simulations because the mind cannot process them efficiently. Writing down the issue clearly helps anchor thinking. Identify exactly what needs attention and what can be set aside for later. When the problem is defined concretely, it becomes easier to segment into actionable components rather than imagining all possibilities at once. Clarity transforms anxiety into direction. Next, identify the immediate first step. Action does not require solving the entire problem at once. It only requires engaging with what can be done right now. Many people overthink because they focus on the magnitude of the problem instead of the first actionable move. Choosing a simple, practical step provides momentum. Even minor progress builds confidence, generates feedback, and reduces mental loops caused by imagining worst-case scenarios. Break down each step into smaller tasks. Complex problems often contain multiple interdependent actions. By separating these into discrete, achievable tasks, the mind gains structure. Each task completed reinforces a sense of capability. When the mind sees measurable results from small actions, it learns to trust the process, rather than panic about uncontrollable outcomes. This reduces the urge to dwell on hypothetical scenarios. Prioritize steps according to impact. Some tasks produce immediate visible results, while others are preparatory or minor. Identify which actions create the most significant effect on the overall outcome, and focus on these first. High-impact actions reduce uncertainty more effectively than addressing trivial elements. When priority is aligned with influence, mental energy is invested wisely, and the cycle of overthinking diminishes. Set realistic timelines for each step. Open-ended tasks fuel overthinking because the mind imagines endless possibilities for delay, failure, or unexpected complications. Assigning a clear time frame for each step introduces accountability and structure. Deadlines focus attention on the present task and limit the inclination to speculate on future outcomes. The discipline of structured timing teaches the mind to act rather than imagine endlessly. Use a visible system to track progress. Writing down steps and checking them off as they are completed reinforces action-oriented thinking. Overthinking often persists when progress is invisible or unmeasured. When tasks are externalized, the mind receives confirmation of accomplishment. This feedback loop reduces anxiety and shifts focus from imagined scenarios to concrete achievements. Recognize that not all outcomes can be predicted. The mind overthinks because it believes that anticipating every possibility prevents failure. In reality, control is limited. Breaking problems into small steps allows adaptation as new information emerges. Each step provides feedback that informs the next action. This iterative approach replaces paralysis caused by imagining every scenario with strategic progress rooted in reality. Focus on the present step rather than the entire problem. Overthinking escalates when attention spreads across multiple hypothetical futures. Concentrating on what can be done immediately limits mental overload and enhances effectiveness. By committing fully to the current task, the mind experiences clarity, calm, and the satisfaction of accomplishment. Progress is built step by step, and the entire problem becomes manageable over time. Maintain flexibility within steps. While breaking down tasks, be prepared to adjust based on evolving circumstances. Overthinking often comes from rigidity.
the belief that every action must fit a predetermined outcome. Flexibility allows the mind to respond to real feedback rather than imagined obstacle. Each small step becomes a learning opportunity rather than a potential failure, and confidence grows with each adjustment. Incorporate regular reflection to evaluate the effectiveness of each step. Reflection is distinct from overthinking because it is goal-directed and actionable. After completing a step, ask, did this move progress the problem toward resolution? What can be improved in the next step? This evaluation prevents repeating ineffective actions and reduces the urge to imagine hypothetical alternatives. Reflection strengthens decision-making and cultivates clarity. Separate emotional reactions from practical steps. Anxiety, fear, or frustration often accompany challenging problems, feeding mental loops. Recognize these feelings without letting them dictate action. By focusing on small, actionable steps, you direct energy towards solutions rather than letting emotion dominate. Action transforms worry into productivity and diminishes the hold of negative emotions on thought processes. Leverage accountability to reinforce step-based action. Sharing a clear plan with a trusted friend, colleague, or mentor increases commitment to executing each step. Overthinking often thrives in isolation, where the mind amplifies uncertainty. External accountability validates progress, provides feedback, and reduces hesitation. By committing to observable steps, mental energy is redirected from endless speculation to purposeful movement. Visualize completion of the current step rather than the entire problem. The mind often exaggerates obstacles by projecting the complexity of the full problem. Focused visualization of immediate action, including preparation, execution, and immediate results, enhances clarity and reduces mental clutter. This method builds confidence, increases motivation, and creates a rhythm of deliberate action that systematically resolves larger challenges. Identify resources for each step. Problems are often overanalyzed because the mind attempts to consider every unknown factor simultaneously. By recognizing what resources, information, support, skills, or tools are needed for the immediate step, the mind can focus on preparation rather than conjecture. Resource-focused planning converts vague worry into practical preparation. Break steps into micro-actions, if needed. Large tasks often trigger overthinking because the mind perceives them as insurmountable. By dividing actions into very small, achievable micro-tasks, the mind experiences repeated reinforcement of success. This reduces anxiety and creates momentum. Each completed micro-action signals progress and minimizes the need to imagine extensive hypothetical outcomes. Keep attention on what is controllable. Overthinking frequently arises when attention drifts to variables beyond influence. By linking steps to actions that are entirely within your control, you strengthen agency and reduce mental friction. Control over small, achievable actions creates measurable progress, builds confidence, and prevents spirals into imagined failures. Celebrate completion of each step. Recognition of accomplishment reinforces positive behavior. Overthinking often stems from discounting effort and focusing solely on potential problems. Acknowledging completed actions strengthens motivation, validates the step-based approach, and encourages continued momentum toward resolution. Progress becomes visible, tangible, and emotionally satisfying. Anticipate adjustments rather than outcomes. Expecting exact results for every action invites overthinking. Instead, plan to evaluate and adapt after completing each step. This mindset reduces mental loops and maintains focus on process rather than hypothetical results. The mind shifts from imagining every scenario to responding to real-world feedback. Develop a habit of immediate execution. Avoid waiting for the perfect plan or ideal condition. Overthinking thrives in delays, where the mind speculates without action. Committing to starting the first small step immediately provides momentum and reduces mental friction. Immediate engagement transforms abstract concern into tangible action. Document progress and lessons learned. Keeping track of steps taken, outcomes observed, and insights gained externalizes mental processing. Overthinking often persists when ideas are only internal. Recording progress clarifies what has been done, what remains, and what adjustments are necessary. Written feedback reinforces action-oriented thinking and provides a reference for future challenges. Reinforce self-trust through consistent small actions. Each completed step confirms the mind's ability to navigate problems effectively. Confidence grows, anxiety diminishes, and reliance on overthinking decreases. The brain learns that solutions emerge through deliberate action, rather than endless speculation. Small steps become proof of competence and a shield against indecision. Finally, integrate all steps into a clear sequence toward resolution. By addressing problems sequentially, the mind experiences structure, predictability, and progress. Each small step builds upon the previous, reducing mental overwhelm and transforming large challenges into manageable processes. Over time, the approach trains the mind to focus on what can be done now, diminishing the need to imagine every scenario. Breaking problems into small steps is not only a strategy to manage overthinking, it is a lifestyle of deliberate action. It teaches focus, patience, and practical decision-making. By consistently applying this principle, the mind learns to prioritize action over speculation, progress over worry, and reality over imagination. Confidence grows, mental clarity emerges, and even the most complex problems become manageable through structured, step-by-step engagement. Action, reflection, adjustment, and progress replace endless mental loop. Each step taken diminishes the hold of overthinking, reduces stress, and strengthens the sense of control. By focusing on small actionable elements, rather than every hypothetical scenario, you gain clarity, maintain energy, and achieve measurable outcomes. This principle transforms challenges into processes, anxiety into productivity, and uncertainty into confidence.
Chapter 6. Control your thinking by setting clear mental boundaries daily. The mind is a powerful tool, but when left unrestricted, it becomes the source of endless loops, anxiety, and indecision. Overthinking grows when thoughts are allowed to wander without limitation, moving from one worry to another, from doubt to fear, without pause. Controlling your thinking starts with establishing clear mental boundaries. These boundaries are not rules imposed from outside, but agreements you make with yourself about where your attention will go, what you will consider, and what you will release. By consciously defining these limits, you reclaim focus, energy, and clarity, and you prevent your mind from spiraling into unnecessary speculation. Begin each day by acknowledging that not every thought deserves your attention. The mind tends to prioritize novelty, fear, and uncertainty, even when these elements are irrelevant or harmful. Recognizing this tendency is the first step in creating mental boundaries. When you identify which thoughts are constructive and which are distractions, you can deliberately choose to engage only with the ones that serve your goals. This choice transforms thinking from reactive wandering into purposeful action. Over time, this approach trains your brain to operate within the boundaries you set, reducing stress and mental exhaustion. One practical way to implement mental boundaries is to allocate specific times for planning and problem solving. Rather than allowing your mind to dwell on every concern throughout the day, schedule focused sessions where you evaluate challenges, make decisions, and outline next steps. Outside of these periods, practice redirecting attention to present tasks and experience. This structured approach prevents your mind from endlessly replaying worries and creates a rhythm of controlled thinking that maximizes productivity without sacrificing emotional energy. Identify areas where mental intrusion is unnecessary. Many thoughts are triggered by external stimuli, news, social media, other people's opinions that do not contribute to your immediate goals or well-being. Recognizing these triggers allows you to limit exposure or disengage mentally. Setting a boundary might mean choosing not to ruminate over someone else's behavior or deciding not to dwell on events outside your control. By consciously deciding which influences are worth processing, you prevent cognitive overload and maintain focus on actionable matters. Develop the habit of naming thoughts before responding to them. When a thought arises, acknowledge it with clarity. Is this thought productive or destructive? Is it relevant to the present or merely a distraction? By labeling your mental activity, you create space between stimulus and reaction. This pause enables deliberate engagement rather than automatic rumination. Over time, the mind learns to recognize patterns of overthinking and responds with self-discipline rather than instinctive wandering. Physical and environmental cues can reinforce mental boundaries, creating spaces that support focus and calm signals to the brain that certain thoughts are welcome while others are not. A tidy workspace, a designated quiet area, or even specific postures for reflective thinking can guide the mind towards structured engagement. When the brain associates certain environments with intentional thinking, distractions lose their power and boundaries become more natural and sustainable. Set explicit limits on the scope of thinking for specific challenges. Overthinking often occurs because the mind attempts to address every aspect of a problem simultaneously. Instead, define what elements require attention now and what can be addressed later. Segmenting mental engagement prevents the brain from being overwhelmed and ensures energy is directed toward practical, actionable concerns. By narrowing focus to relevant components, you maintain clarity, reduce stress, and foster efficiency. Use internal dialogue to reinforce boundaries to yourself with authority and intention. Clarify which thoughts deserve your attention and which can be set aside. This self-directed conversation acts as a mental filter, strengthening the boundary between productive thinking and unnecessary speculation. Repeating these affirmations daily trains the mind to respect its own limits, reducing the tendency to drift into excessive worry or imagined scenarios. Establish limits on emotional engagement with thoughts. Not every idea requires a full emotional response. By consciously controlling the intensity of emotional investment in each thought, you prevent mental exhaustion and maintain perspective. Overthinking often escalates when the mind interprets every potential outcome as urgent or critical. Setting emotional boundaries allows for rational evaluation without being consumed by anxiety, fear, or frustration. Practice mindfulness as a tool to enforce mental boundaries. Observing thoughts without judgment and letting them pass naturally strengthens your ability to decide which ideas to act upon and which to release. Mindfulness teaches the mind that thoughts are transient and attention can be directed intentionally. By recognizing that a thought does not demand action, you reinforce boundaries and prevent endless cycles of rumination. Integrate small daily routines to support mental boundaries. Simple practices such as journaling, focused breathing, or brief reflection sessions provide structured outlets for processing thoughts. These routines prevent unprocessed mental activity from spilling into uncontrolled overthinking. By consistently dedicating time to intentional reflection, you create a buffer between stimulus and reaction, reinforcing the clarity and control of your mind. Be vigilant about language in internal thinking. Overthinking is often fueled by extreme, absolute, or catastrophic phrasing in the mind, such as "I must," "I can't," or "this will never work." Rewriting internal dialogue in measured, realistic terms establishes cognitive boundary. Language shapes attention and emotional response, and by controlling the words used internally, you limit unnecessary escalation of thought and anxiety. Recognize patterns in overthinking and preempt them with boundaries. Certain situations, decisions, or stresses reliably trigger mental looping. By observing these patterns, you can proactively set limits before overthinking begins. For example, knowing that checking emails repeatedly triggers worry allows you to schedule specific periods for email review rather than reacting continuously. Anticipatory boundary setting reduces the opportunity for uncontrolled mental engagement and enhances focus. Use the principle of one thought at a time to maintain clarity.
The mind often multiplies concerns simultaneously, creating overwhelming cognitive load. By committing to process one thought fully before moving to the next, you preserve mental energy and prevent the spiral of imagining every possible outcome. This disciplined approach ensures that each idea receives proper evaluation without cascading into anxiety. Integrate external accountability to reinforce internal boundaries. Sharing your mental boundaries or structured thinking routines with a mentor, coach, or friend increases adherence. External validation and guidance create a supportive framework that strengthens self-discipline. Over time, mental boundaries become internalized, and reliance on external oversight diminishes as habits solidify. Acknowledge when letting go is necessary. Not every thought or concern requires attention. Part of boundary setting involves distinguishing between actionable thoughts and those beyond influence. Learning to release irrelevant concerns reinforces control and prevents the mind from being dominated by what cannot be changed. This conscious release reduces emotional burden and conserves mental energy for meaningful action. Combine boundaries with progressive evaluation. After taking focused action on thoughts within your boundaries, review outcomes to refine the process. This reflection ensures that boundaries remain effective and responsive to reality rather than static or arbitrary. Iterative evaluation strengthens both decision-making and mental discipline, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of controlled, productive thinking. Maintain consistency to reinforce habit. Mental boundaries are effective only when applied regularly. Sporadic adherence allows overthinking to re-establish itself. By practicing daily discipline in defining, respecting, and enforcing boundaries, the mind gradually adopts structured thinking as its default mode. This consistency is essential for sustained mental clarity and emotional stability. Integrate positive reinforcement. Each time a boundary prevents overthinking, recognize the success internally. This acknowledgement strengthens neural pathways associated with deliberate thinking and diminishes the appeal of uncontrolled rumination. Reinforcement builds confidence, demonstrating that the mind can be disciplined and focused on what truly matters. Balance flexibility with rigidity. While boundaries are essential, rigid enforcement can lead to frustration if circumstances require adaptation. Allow mental boundaries to be adjustable in response to real feedback without losing structure. This balance prevents overthinking from re-emerging due to sudden, unexpected variables while maintaining overall control. Understand that boundaries protect cognitive energy. Overthinking consumes attention, emotional stability, and decision-making capacity. By controlling mental space, energy is preserved for important decisions, creative solutions, and effective action. Viewing boundaries as a form of energy management enhances commitment and underscores their practical utility. Finally, integrate all these practices into a daily routine. Begin the day by setting boundaries, engage with thoughts purposefully, reflect on outcomes, adjust boundaries, and reinforce success. Over time, mental clarity and control become automatic, anxiety diminishes, and overthinking loses its grip. Establishing and respecting mental boundaries transforms thinking from a reactive, exhausting process into a deliberate, empowering practice that supports effective decisions, emotional balance, and personal growth.
Chapter 7. Protect your attention from thoughts that create unnecessary stress. Attention is the most valuable resource in your life. How you manage it shapes your decisions, your mood, your productivity, and your overall well-being. Yet, many people surrender their attention to thoughts that bring nothing but stress, worry, and distraction. These thoughts appear harmless at first, small fragments of doubt or concern, but over time, they grow, multiply, and consume energy that could otherwise be used to create meaningful outcomes. Protecting your attention is not about suppressing thoughts entirely or pretending challenges do not exist. It is about choosing which thoughts deserve your focus, which deserve a plan, and which can be released without guilt. Doing this requires awareness, discipline, and a clear understanding of the mind's tendencies. The first step in protecting attention is awareness. Begin by noticing when your mind drifts towards stress-inducing ideas. This drift often happens automatically and without conscious intention. Thoughts about mistakes, imagined failures, or hypothetical scenarios can hijack your focus before you even realize it. By pausing and observing your mental activity, you create the opportunity to intervene. Awareness allows you to recognize the thought for what it is, a mental event, and not a command that must be acted upon. This subtle distinction gives you control and prevents stress from dictating your actions. Next, identify the triggers that repeatedly pull your attention toward stressful thoughts. Certain situations, conversations, or environments reliably provoke anxiety, doubt, or frustration. By mapping these triggers, you can anticipate moments when your attention is vulnerable and prepare strategies to protect it. For instance, if checking social media first thing in the morning triggers worry, you might adjust the routine or create a boundary around digital consumption. Understanding triggers provides clarity on where attention is most at risk and allows you to act deliberately rather than react automatically. Setting mental limits is essential. Thoughts that are not productive should have defined boundaries in terms of time and energy. Give yourself permission to notice a stressful idea, evaluate it briefly, and decide whether it deserves attention. If it does not, consciously release it. Visualize this as letting a conversation pass through your mind without answering every remark. By enforcing these limits consistently, the mind learns that not all thoughts demand engagement, reducing the likelihood that minor concerns will snowball into overwhelming stress. Practice prioritization. Not every thought requires equal weight or immediate resolution. Stress often escalates when minor issues are treated as urgent or critical. Assess each thought objectively and determine which require action today, which can be scheduled for later, and which can be ignored entirely. This prioritization helps conserve attention for matters that have real impact and minimizes wasted energy on hypothetical or minor concerns. It also builds confidence in your decision-making because focus is directed toward actionable outcomes rather than endless mental simulation. Create a mental routine that reinforces boundaries. Set aside specific periods for reflection, planning, or problem-solving, and outside these windows, redirect attention to tasks, presence, or meaningful engagement. Structured time for mental processing prevents stress-inducing thoughts from dominating the day. It is similar to designating time for work, exercise, or rest. Attention is treated as a resource that requires care and discipline. By assigning times for thinking, you reduce the mental clutter that leads to unnecessary anxiety. Incorporate mindfulness techniques to maintain clarity. Observing thoughts without judgment or immediate reaction strengthens the ability to protect attention. Mindfulness teaches that thoughts are fleeting, and attention can be directed intentionally rather than hijacked by fear or worry. When a stressful thought arises, acknowledge it, label it as non-essential, and redirect focus to the present. This practice not only shields attention from unnecessary stress, but also strengthens self-awareness and emotional resilience. Physical cues can reinforce mental protection. Environments that support calm, focus, and clarity signal to the brain which thoughts are welcome and which are not. A clean workspace, limited distractions, and periods of solitude allow the mind to engage with priority tasks without interference. Body posture, breathing, and movement also influence mental state. Standing tall, breathing steadily, and moving intentionally anchor attention in the present and make it less likely for stress-producing thoughts to dominate consciousness. Develop the habit of questioning the validity of thought. Stress often emerges from assumptions, projections, or imagined scenarios. Ask whether the thought is factual, whether it pertains to reality, and whether it demands action. Many stressful thoughts are based on speculation rather than concrete information. By evaluating the legitimacy of each thought before reacting, you filter unnecessary mental noise and maintain control over attention. This practice prevents the mind from amplifying stress unnecessarily and promotes rational, effective decision-making. Implement mental pauses when intrusive thoughts appear.
Instead of responding immediately, take a deliberate moment to breathe, observe, and reassess. Pausing allows for perspective and prevents automatic emotional escalation. It creates a buffer between stimulus and reaction, making it easier to choose which thoughts deserve attention and which should be released. Pauses also teach the mind that not all thoughts require action, strengthening the habit of protecting focus from stress-inducing distraction. Anchor attention in tangible tasks or sensory experience. When stress thoughts arise, redirect to an immediate action or observation that grounds the mind. This could be physical work, a focused task, or simply noticing sensory details around you. Anchoring attention in reality prevents the mind from spinning into imagined problems or uncontrollable scenarios. Over time, this habit strengthens concentration and reduces the tendency to become consumed by unnecessary mental activity. Use structured writing to externalize mental stress. Journaling, note-taking, or listing concerns provides a safe outlet for thoughts without overloading attention. Writing allows evaluation and planning while freeing cognitive resources from constant rumination. The act of recording thoughts reduces mental clutter and ensures attention is focused on what can be controlled rather than what merely stimulates anxiety. Externalization provides clarity and allows reflection without over-engagement. Set clear intentions each morning regarding attention. Decide what matters today, what deserves energy, and what will be set aside. Framing the day with these intentions creates a mental map that guides focus and limits exposure to stress-inducing thought. Intentionality aligns energy with priorities, reduces reactive thinking, and establishes a sense of control over mental space. By consciously designing attention at the start of each day, you prevent scattered, stress-driven thinking. Recognize emotional escalation as a signal to protect attention. Stress often manifests physically through tension, restlessness, or agitation. When these signals appear, it indicates that thoughts are consuming attention excessively. Use these moments to step back, recalibrate, and redirect focus. Controlling attention is not about avoiding emotion, but managing it so that mental energy is allocated constructively rather than consumed by unnecessary stress. Practice saying no to mental demand. Not every thought or worry requires engagement. Mentally declining non-essential concerns, questions, or hypotheticals protects attention for priority matters. This skill requires self-respect and confidence, reinforcing that your energy is finite and should be allocated intentionally. Saying no internally strengthens boundaries and prevents overthinking from eroding clarity, productivity, and emotional stability. Monitor consumption of external information. Constant exposure to news, social media, and opinions can flood the mind with stress-inducing thought. Choose what to read, watch, or listen to with discernment, and limit time spent on content that provokes unnecessary worry. Protecting attention involves filtering inputs as carefully as managing internal thought. By controlling what enters your mind, you maintain focus and reduce vulnerability to anxiety. Integrate brief breaks to reset attention. The mind cannot maintain sustained focus indefinitely, and stress can accumulate if attention is overextended. Short periods of rest, movement, or breathing exercises allow the brain to recover and reinforce boundaries. These micro breaks prevent mental fatigue and maintain clarity, making it easier to discern which thoughts are essential and which are distractions. Reinforce protective habits consistently. Mental discipline develops gradually through repetition. Each day presents opportunities to practice redirecting attention, setting boundaries, and releasing unnecessary stress. Consistent reinforcement ensures that protecting attention becomes an automatic response rather than a conscious effort. Over time, this habit strengthens resilience, emotional control, and overall mental clarity. Recognize that protecting attention is an act of self-respect. By deciding where focus goes, you honor your energy, time, and well-being. It is not avoidance but a deliberate choice to engage with thoughts that serve purpose, progress. This mindset shifts stress from being a constant drain to being a manageable challenge that can be addressed when necessary without dominating mental space. Finally, integrate all these practices into a daily routine. Begin by setting intentions, observing thoughts, identifying triggers, questioning validity, and anchoring attention in present tasks. Use structured writing, scheduled reflection, and controlled exposure to external inputs to maintain clarity. Pause, breathe, and redirect when stress arises. Over time, these practices combine to form a resilient mental framework where attention is protected, stress is minimized, and focus remains on meaningful action. Protecting attention is not a one-time effort. It is a daily practice that builds mental strength, emotional stability, and a life guided by intention rather than reaction.
Chapter 8. Train your mind through routines that encourage clarity and calm. Your mind is like a tool, and how you train it determines how effective it becomes in every area of life. Every thought, every decision, every moment of attention either strengthens your mental clarity or diminishes it. When life is full of noise, demands, and uncertainty, the mind can become scattered, restless, and overwhelmed. Training your mind through routines is not a luxury. It is a necessity if you want to maintain calm, make sound decisions, and stay productive. Routines are the structure that guides attention, organizes thoughts, and builds habits that returns mental clarity. Without them, the mind drifts, overthinks, and succumbs to stress. By intentionally designing daily practices, you cultivate a calm presence and create a mental environment where focus and insight thrive. The first step is establishing a consistent morning routine. How the day begins sets the tone for every decision, reaction, and thought that follows. Start with practices that ground you and bring attention to the present. This could include brief moments of quiet reflection, controlled breathing, or simply sitting and noticing your surroundings. Avoid jumping immediately into emails, messages, or urgent tasks. These activities scatter attention and amplify stress before the mind has a chance to stabilize. By training the mind each morning, you signal that calm, deliberate thought will guide your day rather than reactive distraction. Incorporate structured planning into your routine. Decide on the most important tasks and intentions before distractions take over. Writing down priorities allows the mind to focus on what matters, reducing mental clutter. When the brain knows there is a clear cane, it spends less energy worrying about forgotten details or imagined problems. This clarity produces a sense of calm because you are guiding attention deliberately rather than letting external events dictate your mental state. Designate specific times for reflection. This is not idle rumination, but focused mental examination of experiences, decisions, and emotions. By setting aside time for reflection, you prevent thoughts from creeping in unpredictably and overwhelming attention. Reflection becomes a tool to process information, release unnecessary stress, and evaluate the effectiveness of actions. It allows the mind to review, learn, and reset without succumbing to anxiety or overthinking. Consistent reflection is a cornerstone of mental training because it reinforces awareness and conscious choice. Integrate movement into daily routine. Physical activity influences mental clarity more than most people realize. Walking, stretching, or intentional exercise releases tension, improves focus, and regulates emotional states. When the body is stiff or restless, the mind often mirrors that tension with scattered or racing thoughts. Movement signals the brain that the body is capable, alert, and ready to process information efficiently. A simple practice of brief movement periods at regular intervals reinforces calm and focus throughout the day. Anchor routines with sensory grounding exercises. Use sight, sound, touch, or breath to maintain attention in the present. Focusing on sensory input trains the mind to disengage from unnecessary stress and hypothetical scenarios. For instance, noticing the feel of the ground under your feet, the rhythm of your breathing, or the sounds around you strengthens mental presence. These small moments accumulate, building a habit of clarity that persists even during chaotic or stressful periods. Develop mental checkpoints. Throughout the day, pause and assess the state of your mind. Are thoughts scattered? Are you reacting impulsively? Are emotions dictating decisions? Short, deliberate pauses allow you to realign attention with intention and reset focus. These mental checkpoints reinforce the habit of conscious engagement rather than passive reactivity. Over time, the brain begins to recognize these moments as opportunities to regain clarity and calm automatically. Use repetitive, consistent practices to strengthen focus. Repetition trains the mind in the same way exercise trains muscles. Simple daily habits like journaling, meditative breathing, or reviewing priorities strengthen cognitive pathways that support attention and reduce susceptibility to stress. The consistency creates familiarity, which in turn reduces the mental effort required to maintain calm. The brain responds to predictable routines by becoming more efficient, and stress loses its grip because the mind knows how to navigate challenges methodically. Incorporate digital discipline into routines. Modern life bombards attention with notifications, messages, and endless information. Training the mind includes protecting it from these distractions through intentional use of devices. Schedule times for checking emails or social media, and avoid multitasking when focusing on meaningful work. When routines include controlled engagement with digital input, mental clarity strengthens because attention is directed deliberately rather than fragmented by constant interruption. Prioritize mental hygiene. Just as physical hygiene maintains health, mental hygiene maintains clarity and calm. Include routines that detoxify the mind from negativity, unproductive worry, and unnecessary comparison. Practices like writing down achievements, reviewing personal progress, or identifying lessons learned help the mind focus on constructive thought patterns. Mental hygiene routines reinforce stability by encouraging the brain to recognize value and dismiss irrelevant or harmful thinking. Integrate consistent rest into your training. Sleep is not optional, it is essential for clarity, memory, and decision-making. Include wind-down routines that signal the mind to release tension and prepare for restorative. This might involve reflection, calming activities, or a structured evening plan. When routines support rest, the mind retains focus during waking hours and avoids exhaustion-driven overthinking. Training attention also means protecting energy, and proper rest is foundational to mental performance. Practice intentional repetition of thought focus. When a specific problem or task demands attention, dedicate blocks of time to fully engage without interruption. Avoid splitting focus across multiple concerns simultaneously. This strengthens cognitive discipline and trains the mind to allocate energy efficiently. Over time, this routine builds patience, prevents unnecessary mental fatigue, and reduces the instinct to overthink everything in fragmented bursts. Use small rituals to reinforce calm. These can be as simple as taking a few breaths before starting work, listening to a short piece of music, or walking quietly for a minute. Small rituals cue the brain that a period of clarity and intentional thinking is beginning. They anchor attention, reduce distraction, and create consistency that strengthens mental control. Training the mind is not always about grand exercises. It is often the accumulation of these subtle, repeated signals that produce profound results. Reflect on the outcomes of routines daily. End each day by assessing what practices supported clarity and what moments allowed distraction or stress to dominate. This reflection allows for adjustments and ensures that mental training is continuously aligned with real-world results. A routine is only effective if it produces measurable improvement in focus, emotional stability, and decision-making.
Daily reflection reinforces accountability, strengthens discipline, and builds resilience against mental chaos. Pair routines with environmental alignment. Create spaces that support calm and focus. A clean desk, minimal visual clutter, and reduced noise levels reinforce the habits practiced in mental routines. Environment interacts with mental state, and deliberate alignment strengthens the effect of routine. The brain associates the environment with focused, calm activity, making it easier to sustain attention and resist distraction. Introduce consistency in emotional regulation practice. Daily routines should include habits that stabilize emotional response, such as brief pauses, deliberate breathing, or reviewing emotional reactions. By regularly practicing emotional checks, the mind learns to remain calm under pressure, and stress-inducing thoughts lose their grip. This builds a foundation for clarity because decisions are informed by reason rather than reactive emotion. Balance structured and flexible routines. While consistency is key, allow space for adaptation when unexpected events occur. Mental training is not about rigidity, but about creating habits that guide attention even when plans change. Flexibility within routine reinforces resilience, ensuring that clarity and calm persist even when circumstances are unpredictable. Finally, recognize that training your mind is a continuous process. Each day is an opportunity to reinforce habits, protect attention, and strengthen the pathways that produce calm and clear thinking. Routines do not create perfection, they create consistency, stability, and readiness. With deliberate practice, structured reflection, and disciplined engagement, the mind becomes a reliable tool capable of navigating complexity without succumbing to unnecessary stress. The long-term result is a life where attention is defended, clarity is maintained, and calm becomes the natural state rather than an occasional occurrence.
Chapter 9. Evaluate choices objectively without letting fear or doubt dominate. Making decisions is not just a moment of action. It is the culmination of clarity, insight, and self-awareness. Many people believe that choosing is simply picking one option over another. But real decision-making requires a mind that is grounded, disciplined, and free from the distortions of fear and doubt. Fear clouds judgment, magnifies risks beyond reality, and traps people in hesitation. Doubt questions competence, erodes confidence, and prevents movement forward. Both forces can dominate the mind, making even simple choices feel overwhelming. To evaluate choices effectively, it is essential to first recognize when fear or doubt has entered the mind. Awareness is the foundation. Observe the physical sensations that accompany these emotions. Tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, tension in the shoulders, or restless thoughts racing in circles. These signs signal that the mind is reacting emotionally rather than thinking objectively. Identifying these reactions is the first step in regaining control and approaching decisions rationally. Next, create mental distance from immediate impulses, pause intentionally, and separate the initial emotional reaction from the actual evaluation of options. When fear or doubt arises, the brain often wants to react instantly, avoiding discomfort or imagined negative outcomes. By deliberately pausing, you allow the analytical part of your mind to assess facts, authorities, and potential consequences without distortion. This pause is not a delay, it is a deliberate act of self-control that enables objectivity. Treat fear and doubt as information rather than directives. They are signals, not commands. Recognizing this distinction transforms anxiety into useful insight. Instead of acting out of avoidance, you can use the energy of these emotions to carefully examine choices. Gather information systematically before making judgments. People often make decisions based on incomplete data or ensigns fueled by worry. Commit to collecting facts, understanding context, and evaluating the reliability of sources. When the mind is anchored in accurate information, fear loses its influence because uncertainty decreases. Doubt diminishes when evidence clarifies what is true and what is imagined. Use structured approaches like writing down options, listing pros and cons, and visualizing potential outcomes in practical terms. These steps organize thought, reduce chaos, and give the mind a clear framework to evaluate possibilities without emotional distortion. Separate long-term impact from short-term discomfort. Fear often exaggerates immediate discomfort or risk, while doubt can magnify short-term failure in imagination. When evaluating choices, focus on how actions will shape the future rather than reacting to momentary unease. Ask, which option aligns with values, goals, and desired outcomes? Which action, even if uncomfortable now, produces sustainable growth and improvement? Shifting perspective from immediate emotional response to long-term consequence strengthens the ability to remain objective and reduces the control of fear and doubt. Practice mental simulations carefully and deliberately. Imagining outcomes can either fuel worry or prepare you for action. Train the mind to visualize realistic consequences rather than catastrophic scenarios. Consider possible results, their probability, and potential solutions for obstacles. Avoid dwelling on what-if scenarios that amplify fear. Instead, use imagination strategically to evaluate practical paths forward. This kind of controlled simulation builds confidence, improves preparedness, and reinforces objectivity by focusing on tangible steps rather than imagined disasters. Engage critical questioning. Examine each assumption that fear or doubt presents. Ask, is this concern based on evidence or speculation? Is this risk real or exaggerated in my mind? Challenge internal narratives that distort perception. Objective evaluation requires honesty with oneself about biases, past experiences, and mental patterns that may color judgment. By interrogating thoughts, the mind develops clarity and reduces susceptibility to manipulation by emotion. Doubt often disguises itself as prudence. Careful questioning distinguishes caution from immobilizing hesitation. Use deliberate timing in decision-making. Decisions made in a state of heightened stress or pressure are often driven by fear rather than logic. Schedule moments for important evaluations when the mind is calm, rested, and attentive. Avoid rushing choices under emotional duress. When decisions are approached at the right time, with the brain in a stable state, options are considered more rationally, risks are assessed more accurately, and confidence in action increases naturally. Timing reinforces objectivity because it ensures the mind is functioning at its optimal capacity. Develop the habit of separating facts from interpretation. Many fears and doubts arise from subjective interpretations of reality rather than observable facts. Train the mind to ask, what is actually happening versus what I imagine might happen? Distinguishing reality from perception prevents unnecessary stress and enables clear, logical evaluation. This skill grows over time, reinforcing the ability to make decisions without emotional interference. Objectivity thrives when information is analyzed independently from feelings and assumptions. Acknowledge the role of personal values in decisions. Objectivity does not mean ignoring intuition or principle. In fact, clarity increases when choices are measured against personal ethics, priorities, and long-term goals. Ask, does this action reflect who I want to be? Does it align with the standards I hold for myself? Fear and doubt often distract from values, emphasizing avoidance or imagined judgment. Anchoring evaluation in personal truth provides a compass that guides action with integrity, strengthening resilience against emotional disruption. Practice iterative decision-making. Recognize that not every choice must be perfect or final. Small, deliberate actions allow you to test outcomes and adjust as necessary. Fear diminishes when the mind realizes that mistakes are learning opportunities rather than catastrophic failures. Doubt loses control when a flexible approach allows adaptation. By breaking decisions into manageable steps,
evaluation becomes a process of ongoing refinement rather than a paralyzing moment of judgment. Objectivity is reinforced because the focus shifts from imagined consequences to measurable actions. Incorporate feedback loops, actively seek input from trusted sources and relevant experience. Hearing different perspectives provides information that counterbalances biased or fear-driven thinking. Evaluation is strengthened when external insight complements internal analysis. Feedback also reduces the burden of internal doubt because it grounds decisions in shared observation and practical knowledge rather than isolated speculation. Train emotional awareness alongside analytical skills. Fear and doubt often appear as physical sensations or recurring thoughts. By recognizing how these emotions manifest, you gain the ability to distinguish them from rational evaluation. Awareness practices such as mindfulness, brief reflection, or journaling reinforce the habit of observing without reacting. The mind learns to notice fear and doubt, consider their validity, and then proceed with deliberate analysis. This balance of emotional insight and logical assessment is the essence of objective decision-making. Create accountability structure. When choices are evaluated objectively, follow-through is crucial. Commit to acting according to reasoned judgment rather than succumbing to fear-driven procrastination. Accountability might involve sharing goals with a mentor, tracking decisions, or reviewing outcomes daily. Knowing there is responsibility for action encourages the mind to prioritize rational evaluation over impulsive avoidance. Accountability reinforces discipline and cultivates confidence in objective reasoning. Recognize that fear and doubt are temporary and situational. They do not define capability or potential outcomes. Training the mind to observe them as passing experiences reduces their influence. Every decision made with deliberate evaluation builds evidence that emotions are guides, not dictate. Over time, repeated practice diminishes the automatic power of fear and doubt, replacing reactive hesitation with steady, confident analysis. Finally, integrate evaluation into daily life consistent. Every choice, from small daily decisions to major life actions, presents an opportunity to practice objective assessment. Overthinking diminishes when the mind is trained to recognize fear, analyze evidence, and act deliberate. Confidence grows as decisions are guided by rational thought rather than emotional distraction. Clarity becomes habitual because attention is consistently directed toward what is real, actionable, and aligned with purpose. By cultivating these practices, the mind becomes resilient, focused, and capable of navigating uncertainty without being paralyzed by fear or doubt. When you make evaluating choices a disciplined routine, life becomes navigable even in complexity. Fear and doubt may still appear, but they no longer dominate. The mind becomes reliable, decisions are more consistent, and the sense of personal agency strengthens. Objective evaluation is not a skill reserved for extraordinary moments. It is a daily habit, reinforced through awareness, structure, and practice. Every choice becomes an opportunity to act with clarity, reduce unnecessary worry, and strengthen confidence in your ability to handle life effectively. This chapter establishes the foundation for decision-making that is intentional, informed, and resilient, equipping the mind to respond with insight rather than react with emotion.
Chapter 10. Commit to consistent forward movement instead of dwelling on possibilities. Progress does not happen by thinking about every possible outcome. Many people spend hours imagining scenarios, worrying about what might go wrong, and analyzing options endlessly. They convince themselves that careful consideration will prevent mistakes or lead to perfect decisions. But the truth is, overthinking creates hesitation, drains energy, and stalls action. Committing to consistent forward movement means choosing to act despite uncertainty. It is the understanding that life is experienced in steps and that momentum, even small, is far more productive than endless speculation. Movement is not reckless, it is deliberate, calculated, and rooted in the understanding that action produces clarity. When the mind is engaged in doing rather than imagining, possibilities transform into tangible outcomes, lessons, and measurable progress. Recognizing the difference between productive thought and paralyzing rumination is the first step toward consistent forward movement. Start by identifying the smallest possible action that moves you toward your goal. People often get stuck because they try to solve everything at once or achieve complete certainty before acting. This desire for total preparation is a trap. Instead, focus on one manageable step. It could be sending an email, making a phone call, outlining a plan, or completing a short task. Small actions reduce mental overwhelm while creating forward momentum. When movement occurs, the mind perceives progress, stress decreases, and confidence grows. These small victories build energy that fuels subsequent actions, establishing a rhythm of consistency that overpowers fear of unknown outcomes. A key principle in consistent forward movement is establishing routine. Repetition of deliberate action reduces decision fatigue and strengthens commitment. When certain behaviors become habitual, the mind stops overanalyzing and begins performing automatically toward progress. Morning planning sessions, daily task reviews, and scheduled reflection periods create structure that supports continuous action. Routines provide a framework for moving forward regardless of fluctuating motivation, emotional state, or fear of imperfection. They make action inevitable because consistency becomes embedded in daily life rather than dependent on fleeting determination. Prioritize decisions that produce visible results. Overthinking thrives when possibilities are vague or hypothetical. By choosing actions with measurable impact, the mind experiences feedback, learning, and reinforcement. Each completed task demonstrates capability, reduces doubt, and encourages continued movement. Evaluate which steps are most likely to generate meaningful outcomes and direct energy there. This approach prevents wasted effort and ensures that even small actions contribute to tangible progress, reinforcing the value of consistent movement over endless speculation. Focus attention on present opportunities rather than imagined scenarios. Possibilities exist only as mental constructs until acted upon. The habit of dwelling on what-ifs creates paralysis and prevents momentum. Instead, train attention on concrete tasks that are immediately accessible. Assess available resources, identify actionable options, and begin executing without waiting for ideal circumstances. The present moment is where progress is possible. Delaying action for imagined perfect conditions ensures stagnation, while commitment to immediate movement transforms intention into reality. Embrace imperfect action. Fear of mistakes often prevents people from moving forward. It is essential to recognize that errors are natural, unavoidable, and educational. Committing to consistent action does not require perfection. It requires willingness to act, learn, and adjust. Each action, regardless of outcome, informs the next step. By reframing mistakes as feedback rather than failure, the mind releases the paralysis of overthinking and channels energy into practical execution. Progress is built on iteration, not flawless planning. Use mental accountability to reinforce forward movement. Commit to a daily check-in with yourself or a trusted mentor to review actions and outcomes. This process creates external pressure to act, reducing the tendency to dwell on possibilities. Accountability highlights patterns of procrastination, reinforces discipline, and celebrates progress. It shifts focus from imagined scenarios to tangible steps, cultivating a mindset where movement is prioritized over speculation.
Cultivate clarity of purpose. Forward movement is more sustainable when actions are aligned with clear goals. Vague intentions create uncertainty, which fuels overthinking. Define what you are working toward, why it matters, and what immediate actions will contribute. Purpose provides a reference point that informs decisions and ensures that each step is meaningful. When the mind is anchored in purpose, the fear of making the wrong choice diminishes, because progress is measured by alignment with goals, not perfection in execution. Break larger objectives into sequences of achievable tasks. Large goals are intimidating and encourage mental spinning in endless possibilities. By decomposing them into smaller steps, each action becomes approachable, actionable, and trackable. Momentum builds naturally as tasks are completed, reinforcing the value of consistent movement. Each step taken is a visible demonstration that action leads to results, weakening the influence of fear and speculative thinking. Train mental resilience by embracing uncertainty. Consistent movement requires accepting that outcomes cannot be fully controlled or predicted. Life is inherently uncertain, and overthinking magnifies imagined risks. Resilience grows when the mind acknowledges uncertainty as normal and focuses on controllable action. Energy is directed toward doing rather than worrying, and confidence increases as each step confirms capability, regardless of outcome. By normalizing uncertainty, forward movement becomes habitual rather than reactive. Incorporate reflection without stagnation. Reflection is necessary for learning, but can be dangerous when it devolves into rumination. Take time to analyze what worked, what did not, and what should change in the next step. Use insights to inform future actions, but avoid excessive analysis that delays execution. Reflection should produce guidance for movement, not excuses for inaction. It reinforces learning while maintaining momentum as the central focus. Reinforce motivation through visible progress tracking. Keep a record of daily actions and their impact. Observing consistent forward movement, even in small increments, validates effort, strengthens confidence, and reduces the desire to overanalyze. Progress creates momentum, and momentum creates clarity. Each completed action reinforces the habit of moving forward, demonstrating that consistent effort produces tangible outcomes that are more reliable than imagined possibilities. Develop self-compassion to counter hesitation. Many people dwell on possibilities because fear of failure or criticism dominates. Treat yourself with understanding and patience while committing to action. Recognize that growth occurs through doing, learning, and adjusting, not through endless deliberation. Self-compassion reduces anxiety, encourages consistent action, and shifts focus from imagined failure to practical execution. By being kind yet disciplined with yourself, the mind maintains clarity and momentum simultaneously. Utilize decision check. Identify moments where evaluation is necessary and moments where action is mandatory. Avoid blurring these distinctions. Some periods require analysis, but action must dominate most of the time. Setting clear boundaries between thinking and doing prevents mental drift, reduces hesitation, and ensures that possibilities do not dominate over concrete action. Decision checkpoints create a rhythm where forward movement becomes the default mode. Surround yourself with a supportive environment. Engage with individuals who model action, consistency, and practical problem solving. Distance from those who dwell excessively on possibilities, overanalyze, or induce doubt. Environmental cues influence mental habits, and a network that prioritizes execution strengthens personal commitment to movement. Observing others taking action reinforces the mindset that doing is more effective than speculating. Integrate small wins into a larger strategy. Forward movement is cumulative. Even minor actions accumulate to significant results over time. Recognize that the sum of consistent steps outweighs the value of perfect prediction. Every small accomplishment builds confidence, reduces overthinking, and reinforces the principle that momentum is more powerful than endless consideration. Tracking cumulative progress provides a tangible reminder that consistent effort is transformative. Commit to action as a habit rather than a choice. Shift the mindset from wondering whether to act to deciding to act automatically within set parameters. Habitual movement reduces reliance on willpower, minimizes fear, and limits doubt. Action becomes reflexive and consistent rather than delayed by speculation. This habit ensures continuous progress even when energy, motivation, or clarity fluctuates. Anchor actions in immediate reality. Focus on what is directly actionable in the present rather than hypothetical possibility. Identify what can be done right now to advance goals and concentrate energy there. The mind becomes more practical, grounded, and effective. Forward movement is sustainable when it is tethered to tangible action rather than imagined scenario. Finally, embrace the philosophy that life is shaped by movement, not thought. Consistent action, even if small or imperfect, produces clarity, learning, and measurable progress. Overthinking creates an illusion of control but prevents real results. By committing to forward movement, the mind shifts from indecision to mastery, from fear to confidence, and from possibility to reality. Momentum becomes self-reinforcing, resilience grows, and each step, no matter how small, builds a life of achievement, purpose, and clarity. This habit transforms uncertainty into a practical path forward and establishes a mindset where doing dominates imagining, results replace speculation, and progress becomes inevitable.